Welcome back to another episode of the XRP Pod. Today, we're going to get into a lot because you've got two things happening right now as we speak. And of course, one everybody's talking about, which is the Clarity Act. What is its position now in DC, especially looming as we start to look at more pressure on not only the crypto industry, but the banking industry? Because I've got a special piece there we'll be talking about toward the end of the episode today. With me today is going to be Brad Kimes. And of course, you guys know him from the XRP Vegas event. We'll talk a little bit about that, get into some other details. You guys do not want to miss this one. Brad is a wealth of information when all of this hits. There are some things coming up in Europe. And of course, that means heated issues with some of the biggest trading partners in the world when you look at the EU, but primarily many of the countries within the EU. What does that look like if things change over there? We'll be covering that. And of course, we'll get into some of the macro events that are happening here in the US around jobs, of course, the new Fed chair and all that good stuff. So it's going to be a good one. You guys know what to do. If you have not liked and subscribed to the show, first of all, do that. And by the way, thank you so much for all the comments. We do follow those. Great ideas on speakers and people that we should have here on the show. We are definitely considering many of those. Our producers will work on trying to get in touch with some of your great ideas. So continue that. Just keep putting comments down in the show notes. We love that. And of course, if you have someone special that you think is perfect for the XRP pod, you can always DM me over on X, just at Paul Barron's. I want to thank our sponsor today, and that is Uphold, where you guys can earn crypto better. A lot of things happening with Uphold staking rewards, so you can stake up to 20 different cryptocurrencies and get into the reward side of things. New tokens, early access, along with full transparency. This is one of the best platforms out there to make trades on when it comes to crypto. The other thing you guys should be doing is this right here. Get the card, the XRP rewards card, which comes in the form of an Uphold debit card. And the nice thing about this, guys, is you can do this without a credit check. Also get up to 6% back on all your purchases for the first 3 months. You can get up to 10% back with a direct deposit stacked in on this. So this is one of the best values out there when it comes to a debit card where you can get into your digital assets. Make sure and check out Uphold. Use the link down below. Let them know we sent you. Let's get into it today because it's going to be a top show. I think you guys know it. And that, of course, is with Mr. Brad Kimes. How are you?
I'm great, Paul. How you doing, man?
Nice to see you.
It's great to
So
see
we've
you.
got a lot happening. Before we get going on to all of that stuff, I want to kind of focus in on what you're doing. And that, of course, is right here on your own X account, man. Look at that beautiful Las Vegas 2026. Here we go. What's going on? Give me some updates here. You got something going on. You got, first of all, you've got a sale that ends in what? 2 weeks, March
Yes,
1st.
March
So we got to
1st.
get acting here on getting tickets for this event.
Absolutely. You know, Paul,
What's up?
we started doing this whole thing because we hadn't had the Clarity Act passed, and we thought, wow, well, we're going to get this thing. So why don't we put tickets on sale to celebrate it?
There you
And
go.
then they postponed it. So,
I like the 589 too, man.
yeah, we had to do it. It's $589. It was a GA ticket at $900. We deduced it to $589.
I like it.
XRP family is loving that price, no doubt. And all other prices have been adjusted as well. But we have so much in store for people this year at 26, Paul. Not only are you going to be there, you're going to be there with an exclusive media desk on the exhibit floor.
Yep.
And obviously you'll be on stage for some events as well. And then we have premier sponsor Ripple, obviously, and we have CEO Brad Garlinghouse on stage with us this year.
Nice.
We have emeritus CTO David Schwartz joining us as well. We also have Evernorth CEO Ashish Birla, who will be on stage.
Yep.
Then we have MoonPay, Keith Grossman, and I got another surprise coming on that front I won't say just yet. And then we have Uphold. We'll have Simon McLaughlin, Nancy Beaton, and the whole crew from Uphold crushing it. Hugo Filion from Flare Networks is going to be there.
Be huge. Hugo is great.
He's great. And Crypto Dad is going to be there. Chris Giancarlo, the former CFTC chairman. We're doing a hackathon where we're giving $100,000 away in prizes. Now, EZA, Dom and Phil, what's that?
Yep. Is he with EZA? Yep.
Yeah, they're doing their Easy A is going to be doing the hackathon, and we're going to be giving away the $100,000 in prizes to the winners of that. It's
Love it.
amazing. As far as I know, largest giveaway that I'm aware of for a hackathon, Paul. So
I like it.
we
Well,
have
the kid
so
I think
much.
the other thing that this event brings that I know that anybody that's been there probably recognizes the camaraderie of all of the people who attend this event, absolutely over the top. It's like no event you have ever been to. I've been to a lot of crypto events. This one stands above the rest for sure. So
Yes,
you
no
guys know what to
question.
do. You can follow Digital Perspectives right there on X. And of course, just visit xrplasvegas.com. I'll show you the website as well. Go there right now and get in. April 30th through May 1st, 2026. XRP plus everything. I like that one. XRP plus
Yes.
everything.
And you know what's interesting? I have to add this too, Paul. For the first time in the crypto space, we have other networks than just XRP on our stage.
Do
I got to
tell.
shout out Vibhu Norby from Solana, who is going to be on our stage representing
Wait a
Solana.
minute. Vibu is going to be there?
Vibhu's going to
Oh
be
my
there on
God. That
stage,
would be
baby.
that's gonna be so much. We're gonna have to have him in the media booth, for sure. So we'll
We're
give you I'll reach out to him because we had him on a show not too long ago.
You got to do it. And I caught that show. It was hot. And then we're going to have Simon Babakani and Zebek on stage
Okay,
too.
Z-Back, nice.
So,
Nice.
and we're working on some other areas and, protocols and networks out here too, because it is XRP plus everything.
I
So
like it.
we're
I
all
like it.
inclusive. We welcome all different networks and communities to our conference because we should be working together, not apart.
Well, we can't say that about other conferences that, are out there,
No, we cannot.
unfortunately, but, I won't mention names. Here, we know what's up. Listen, this is what happens in the industry. I think you get into that tribalism,
Yeah.
and I would say that the XRP community is one of the few that does not play into that. Sure, there's everything's competitive.
Yes.
You're competitive about any stock you own. You're
Yes.
competitive about an ETF you might have, but in general, you're looking at kind of a world where hopefully investing is lifting all boats,
Yes.
rising tide, and I think that's where we are right now. But
Absolutely.
a lot of stuff to talk about. Hey, let's get into a couple of points I wanted to lead off with.
Mhm.
One was, of course, some of the private payroll data that just came out. Peter St. Onge hit a tweet on this, and I thought it was interesting. He was hitting on a few points that a lot of people may not be completely aware of. And I'll zoom in on this right now. Private payrolls up 172,000, wages up. I didn't know wages were up 5%. That's pretty significant. And then U6 jobless down 600,000. Employment rate back down 0.3, smallest federal workforce since 1966. That was the point that I think is huge. We have gone back 60 years, 60 years of federal workforce. Man, that is insane. You would think that this would create a macro environment that continues to push assets up. What are you feeling right now in the market in terms of why we're not seeing assets responding to situations like this right here?
It's such a great question because these are great numbers, and you would think normally it would trigger the market, right?
Yep.
But I you know, I'll say that I think this year is a very definitive year, Paul. To the point that you're making, legislation is so close
Mhm.
because we're right at the precipice of this. This is my speculation. I speculate that the big money knows that this is happening. We know there's tons of big banks out here that are
Right.
building all their platforms and infrastructure. They know it's coming, but they know they're also waiting for that legislation to pass before everyone allocates the capital and turns it on to go full blast in this space. And that's what I think. And here's the other thing. They didn't spend 5 years suppressing this market and this technology for nothing.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
else do you establish the difference between a safe, highly compliant internet and the dark web?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
This is how it's done.
That's a good analysis because I think when you compare the impact that the internet had on literally every industry out there, I mean, we're not talking about just a handful. We're talking about every industry that basically had an impact of what happened in really the early 2000s. The
Mhm.
financial architecture is the difference here because we're talking about, and which is why we're seeing the banks fight this through so much here as we come to hopefully to the wire on Clarity Act. But I would agree with you. I think the implications globally are so great in terms of mass and scale. It's difficult to even get your head around it. That's the thing I think a lot of people are missing right now. One other thing that, of course, could affect a lot of this is going to be our new Fed chair. You got Kevin Warsh coming in right there, and of course, the White House is calling for his allocation or movement into the nomination of the Fed chair pretty quickly. So he now remember, Chair Powell exits in May, and that, of course, rotates right in. Many people thought that this would be another 60, 90 days for confirmation. It looks like they're trying to like almost do week after kind of moves
Yeah.
here. With Warsh coming to power, granted, we have other, Fed governors in there that make up that board of governors that do come to alignment around rate cuts. Do you think rate cuts really matter going forward here in 2026?
Yeah, 100% I do. I do, because I know what that means. You cut the rates, you put more money back in everybody's pocket, and then they go risk on assets. Just
Yep.
generally speaking, that's what history has told us.
hmm Well, I think the point when you look at risk on assets, the idea behind rate cuts has always been, what does this do for the modern investor who is rotating right now between stock market, maybe some ETFs. We'll talk about ETFs in a second, but also rotating out of, and this is something that we're seeing here on our own research, and we cover it on the channel quite a bit, is the rotation out of the lower half of crypto tokens.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is we have seen less and less traffic and activity on, I'll say it, subpar blockchain projects. And it seems to be the cream is truly floating to the top, and we're getting more activity within, the top 20, maybe the top 30 tokens right now. What are you finding when it comes to, do you think this market could really centralize around kind of a mag 20 when
I
it comes to blockchain?
It's a great question. I do. I really do, and I think, I just saw something to your point about all of this from, I can't remember if it was Kathy Wood or somebody never talked. I think it was Kathy Wood. She was mentioning that the digital asset treasuries have not gone well this year because
Yeah.
of the rollover in the market in October, and it still hasn't quite recovered, and that's been harmful to the corporates who have created a digital asset treasury. And I speak to that too, back to your point about a Mag 20, Mag 30 kind of vibe. I absolutely believe we're going to see that because one, you're seeing ETF companies branch off and want to do indexes, a
Mhm.
basket, right? To
Yeah.
capture that exact explosion. And two, to speak to digital asset treasuries, which I do believe have failed. But I think they've failed because from the top, you talked about the bottom of the market, seeing money flee and go to the top. It has. And we've seen larger projects like outflows, massive outflows for Bitcoin, which I believe has been a reshuffling because of the collapse of these digital asset treasuries and the volatility in the market right now. It scares people. But I've come up with a new term. DATs are digital asset treasuries, Paul. Now I'm calling for DAUTs and DAUTs, which are digital asset utility treasuries. And
Okay.
if corporations go with a digital asset utility treasury that I'm calling a DAUT, then you're talking about building something that is for the future and to last and not have the volatile spikes. Because when you have 24-hour liquidity happening and utility on a network, you're not going to experience that same level of volatility.
Well, we saw, with Evernorth, we've had Evernorth and their team on before. This is kind of the direction that they're heading.
Yeah.
I think you're going to probably see a handful of other XRP dots out there because of the utility of what the ledger could do. But also, I think the opportunity here now to put XRP to work and going out there in places like Flare Network, which we'll talk, hopefully we'll have Hugo out at the event.
Yep.
He's been on our show a lot. Axelar, of course, is another opportunity. The other thing that I anticipate we're going to start to see is some activities around other assets being held to support the purchase of more XRP. And I'm just kind of curious whether metals will play into this, maybe even other technologies that could go into these companies. I agree with you. I think it's going to be companies that are definitely moving into other investment strategies for sure, which puts a lot of pressure on the Bitcoin ETFs, don't you think?
I think it does. And look, and to the point of everything that you're laying out here, kind of where the vision of where things are right now. If we just look at the Epstein file dump and how much Bitcoin's been involved in that, one of the conversations I've been having on my channel and on X with people is just the idea. I don't think Bitcoin's going away. I mean, the US dollar is used for more nefarious activity around the world than
Yeah.
anything. However, I do know that government usually never lets a good crisis go to waste, right? So there is a crisis unfolding with Epstein files, elite people, and really harmful activity, horrible activity, horrific, in fact. But I wonder if the US government will use this as an opportunity, Paul, to say, this is why we need a national payment layer ledger that can be trusted.
Okay.
And by the way, we're going to start acquiring Bitcoin through a digital asset bond issuance. And then what goes back out will go back out as a wrap Bitcoin. So that way we know where it all is.
Interesting.
That's my thought.
Well, I mean, you look at the movement right now in the ETFs. This is Harvard, who sold 21% of its Bitcoin. And of course, they rotated into the Ethereum ETF. I think we're going to see more activity moving into the XRP ETFs coming in maybe from Bitcoin. And if you look at more headlines right here, XRP outpacing top assets right now with 33 million inflow. Obviously, this is people rotating out of Bitcoin as it starts to hover. Did you see the interview with Michael Saylor where he got a little bit tongue tied when the interviewer asked him what his sell point was? He took it all the way down to an $8,000 Bitcoin before they would have to restructure their debt. I don't know if that is completely the model that he's trying to play out, because that doesn't seem too confident, in terms of where this price could hold. Because right now we're kind of trading at or about his average right now. What do you think this does to the long-term effort of Bitcoin?
Well, look, I think it was in that same interview clip that I think it was Becky from CNBC
Yep.
had also asked him, "Well, who's gonna give you a loan against your position? I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
who would loan you? What bank would loan you the money?"
Yeah.
And he was a little struck by that question that
Yeah.
somebody wasn't in the same brainwash mindset, because it's a great question. He really couldn't answer it. He just said that they would, right?
This gets
And
a little unusual. I
well,
mean, you go a sub 60 into the 50K range,
yeah.
that gets a lot of pressure on MicroStrategy for
You better
sure.
believe it. You better believe it. And, I'll just add to that. This is why I think it's so important to watch for the Bitcoin strategic reserve and to pay attention to the Trump family, the Eric Trump, and those that are involved in the Bitcoin mining in
Yep.
America. If they change their position, something's wrong, is the way I see it, or the tea leaves I'm looking at here. And to me, I'm like, if they don't get the Bitcoin strategic reserve, which by the way, Bitcoin doesn't have the utility of many other networks.
Sure.
I'm not throwing shade. It's like
It is
saying
what it
sun's
is.
hot
Yeah.
in August, right? It's just, that's the way it is. But it also has 21 million, Paul. So if they wanted to conflate the price, do a bond issuance on the asset, sell it to the world's citizens, and
Mhm.
then gather the asset to offset the debt, which they're about to print a lot more money
Yeah.
for to send us into the golden age, right? So I don't know. I see this as like a reserve for Bitcoin to me is absolutely imperative if
Mhm.
they're going to continue forward. That's how I see that.
Well, and I think the narrative around what the White House does, because those are the things that, if you look at the checkpoints of what, and I've had this on the show a couple of times, you look at our crypto czar, David Sachs, there's two things I think he has to get done. One, he has to get the Clarity Act through.
Yes.
And then two, I think to your point, a true Bitcoin strategic reserve has to be put in play.
Yeah.
And if one only, okay, I still think that job has had a failure.
Yeah.
Now, will Trump kind of look at it that way in terms of where that administration is. I think obviously Trump has put a pretty hard deadline here now for March 1st on clarity. And after last week's meetings, the pressure is now on both the banks. And it's interesting because you had Patrick Witt. Well, we'll show that tweet in a minute because we'll get into clarity around this. But I think the key is that we're now starting to get a little bit more market, pressure other than just crypto saying, hey, this is the way it should be.
And Paul, let's add this to the Bitcoin conversation as well. Bitcoin's always set at the number one market cap position.
Yep.
Not many people are thinking about what this market looks like when we get on the other side of legislation with the level of tailwinds and trillions of dollars that'll flood in here 24/7, 365 for the payment rails that solve a problem for payments and settlement and clearing, right?
Yeah.
What happens to Bitcoin if it's no longer the number one market cap 3 years from now? 5 years from now, whatever, you pick the date. But, what does that look like then? Unless, this is where I come back to, unless the US government designates a strategic reserve to keep it the shiny, beautiful thing, and it continue to outpace and grow at that level with that adoption, right? Because it only has 21 million. I actually think it was probably created to help offset the debt. And they thought about that. That was the whole reason for the inception of it and the low circulating supply.
Yeah. Well, and yes, exactly. And the point you made there, I think so eloquently, is that when you look on the other side of where this market is heading, clarity is back to the earlier point we made in the show, is that we don't really know what we don't know just yet in terms of where the liquidity is going to come from. And some people may say if the liquidity is going to come from. I think the point that we're getting at right now is that the market opportunity here is absolutely astronomical. And I think a lot of people are trying to figure out how this plays out.
And I want to put this in perspective for some of the people in the audience that really aren't aware of just a quick snapshot of post legislation. So Bitcoin's a couple trillion in market cap today, give or take, more or less. And that's impressive. And that is an impressive number, couple trillion market cap. For example, the XRP ledger and what Ripple has done with buying things like and acquiring G Treasury last year and Hidden Road. Well, Hidden Road does 3 trillion a year. G Treasury does 12.5 trillion in a year.
Yep.
So you get on the other side of legislation, you're talking about $15.5 trillion worth of payments, 24/7, 365 coming in. Now, I'm not suggesting that all of that gets turned on like a light switch the first day. I would imagine to be phased in quarter over quarter like we've seen everything else in this space. But that, again, comparatively to Bitcoin and its market cap and its impressive journey it's had, that level of tapping into that kind of market and access, which is 2 acquisitions, Paul.
Yeah.
That's a drop in the bucket of where we're going. And that's what can happen.
Well, and you do look at the kind of situation right now, market cap setting at 2.3 trillion. Fear and greed still very low on the market right now. And the point I think that you're making is that the opportunity here, if you look at what gold has done just in the last, year, and have become one of the, I would say, one of the shining stars. Now, the question is really, does gold continue its run even post clarity? That is a very, very different question because of where metals are going. Because a lot of countries are continuing to pour more money into gold as a subvert to what's happening to the US dollar. What's your opinion right now on gold and where it might be after clarity?
I think it continues to move because I think, look, I think everything we're seeing is as the current US Treasury Secretary has suggested.
Yeah.
We are witnessing a grand global economic reordering.
Right.
And go in any transition of the monetary system in history past has always been underpinned by gold. And I know that doesn't suit a lot of people in the crypto world, but commodities are commodities for a reason. And we're talking about God's money. This is not going away here. So, for me, and then the tokenization of it is something that is very much under talked about in this space as well. The tokenization of gold, which is happening with Meld on the ledger and a couple other projects as well, I'm aware of. So, I think gold comes along with this because, geopolitically, Paul, and we've touched on this, and I think we're getting into some of this today. All of this really comes back down to preparing for a new world order that is
Yep.
existing and coming our way.
Well, and there's the gold chart right there. You can kind of see after it literally came off of that high of 5,500, spiked way back down to the 4,400 just over a short period of time, guys.
Yeah.
But the interesting point is that gold has stabilized, still holding at around 4,900 to 5K. So does it hold it? Because sentiment trends are still very strong on gold. So could be one to pay attention to. The other thing you got to look at is, to your point, is this shift in the global world order and what's happening right now. And I'll show you a tweet that I think is important, a little bit more political here, but this was a statement that I thought was very important. Let me kind of zoom in on this for you guys. This was pretty much, I would agree, it was more of a war video, but this was Ursula von der Leyen. She, of course, leads the EU. And they basically revealed their war plan, and it was to bring the Ukraine into the EU by 2020. That's next year.
Yeah.
Okay. And if they do that, then this would get into this whole Article 42.7, which is the mutual defense clause for the EU, which means that any country at war, everybody's at war. This is the problem that right now we are dealing with inside the EU. I think we're going to start to see more and more countries that are going to pull out. Slovakia, I think, is going to be coming that way. Hungary's already shown some pretty big. I think Poland could be a big one to watch. And you could see this new, concept right here, which is Frexit, free exit, that could be happening country by country, which could get interesting because the benefit of XRP becomes very relevant if you start seeing multi-currency in Europe re-emerge. So what do you think about that?
Oh, I think you just said it perfectly.
Yeah.
Paul, this, I say this, and I mean every word of this. For me, watching what President Trump is doing, leaning back into the Monroe Doctrine, which is all about Western hemispheric protection, goes hand in hand exactly with what we're seeing here with Europe trying to warmonger and draw the entire other half of the world into conflict.
Yeah.
And to your point, I absolutely believe that there was a vision of this for XRP to serve as a bridge currency. And what you're also seeing, to touch on the point that you're making here, is the destruction of the EU.
Yeah.
It is the globalist agenda coming down like a house of cards.
That's the big part.
And it's huge. It's huge. Now, what do we get out of the globalist agenda is a bridge currency that can, help insulate the world from each other. So everyone can still be a nationalist nation and celebrate their cultures, their heritage, their practice of their government, their laws, rules of the road, all of that. But you have this bridge asset that's designed to sit in between all of the world's money.
Yeah.
When people hear the slogan, what's XRP's role ultimately to serve? All the money, right? It doesn't mean the pennies in your couch cushion, all the money. It means every possible pairing in the FX market and any other tokenized thing of value. It means all the money. And when I come back to this point about the EU that you're making here, we just saw from VetXO on X share that there is a bridge. It is happening right now between a euro stablecoin and the real USD. Now we're talking about inception. We're talking about a very early start, but it is happening. And XRP sits in the middle of it, and real USD to euro OP. This is massive because you're talking about the euro and the US dollar, which are the two most liquid markets for currencies in the world.
Yeah.
We're also talking about that same euro region walking half the world into war unnecessarily.
Yeah.
And now we start to realize, from myself and I think other people in this space, start to really realize the real function that's here and how quickly you could see those two heavy currency pairs that don't normally need liquidity may soon need that liquidity
Liquidity, yeah.
because of these conflicts.
May soon need it, for sure. It's just unique in the sense that I never thought I would see the end of the EU in my lifetime,
Yeah.
because it was such a global effort that had been modeled for the last 40 years in a way that was almost impenetrable.
Yeah.
Then, of course, you see WEF, which I think was the indicator to von der Leyen that this is starting to break apart. Typically, this is a mechanism for the EU to try to possibly hold it together for longer, is basically enter a war.
Yeah.
Because then you're now dealing with nation states. At least you have maybe somewhat of a relevant argument that some of those states might fall for, even though I don't think Maloney is gonna do it in Italy. France would probably hold with the EU. I'm not sure Germany would as much anymore, so they've already started to realize their, error in ways in terms of their energy system. But now you got Maloney putting boats off the coast of Italy. So basically saying, no, we're not going to allow immigrants in. So they've started to kind of go this direction. Man, this is going to get very weird in the EU, I think, in the coming years, for sure.
I definitely think that this whole scenario we're talking about, from the Trump doctrine, the Monroe Doctrine from back in 1820s, all the way up to the split and the dissolving of the EU itself.
Mhm.
For me, Paul, all of this is going to redefine the way the world map looks.
No doubt, no doubt.
The world map's never going to look the same again, and kids in school are going to learn something different about how the world is shaped than we learned coming up as a kid. That's the moment we're truly in, and I don't think a lot of people have really grasped that that's how big this moment is.
Yeah, it is big. I want to take a minute, guys, and just invite you to join the Barron Market Edge private member group. You guys can do that by just clicking the link down in our description. This is your insider's edge to the AI and crypto money revolution, which is what we really focus on here on PBN. This is additional research that I do along with our team. We have a pretty significant team on our research around not only what guides our episodes, but a lot of that research gets built into more content that I drop here on the Barron Market Edge. We do market trends and sentiment analysis, which can be anything from tokens to all sorts of strategies. This, of course, will also guide you over to our Telegram group, and we give this as elite community access. You get bonus content over there, including tax guides, as well as different kinds of asset guides out there that we drop all the time. This is your 10-year vision in action. All you have to do, of course, is just hit that little subscribe button or join the community and get in on it. It's absolutely free. It doesn't cost you a thing, so check it out. Well, speaking of big moments, we got to talk about clarity. One note that I thought was interesting, because we have kind of given Patrick Witt a little bit, and rightly so, a little bit of a hard time. And the reason has really been around his position with the banks, because I felt like, as one of the negotiators, he was kind of coming to the table more so of letting the banks kind of get their way. And he came out with this statement right here. Why this, of course, he's the crypto advisor under David Sachs. But he told Yahoo Finance that banks can offer stablecoin yield products just like crypto platforms, and you shouldn't view them as competitive threats. So has he pivoted back to, or was something said by the administration saying, the banks need to come to the table? We're too far away on the negotiation. What do you think the art of the deal did to try to restructure how the advisory group is now starting to act when it comes to the clarity?
Well, I have to say, my reading of the tea leaves here go like this. Anthony Scaramucci said that he spoke with Chuck Schumer and the other leading Dems in the Senate.
Yeah.
And they said quite straight and frankly to him that they're not fighting this thing. They got to pass it because they don't want to go up against that super PAC for the midterms. So that's the Dems. That's the Dems in the Senate. We're going to need them to get to 60 votes. So that's that part of it. And then we have the crypto sector and then the banking sector. coming to the banking sector and executive director Witt's comments here.
Yeah.
Now, I can't speak for him, and I'm not speaking for him. But what I'd say, what I get out of this when he says, the banks can offer yield like, stable coins can, essentially is the tweet, right?
Yeah.
And when I see that, I think to myself, again, this sweeps the larger problem right under the rug. The banks aren't talking about the real problem here, Paul. The real problem isn't stable coin yield alone. Stable coin yield alone is a proxy war to the real problem.
Yeah.
The real problem is fractional reserve lending. And
100%.
banks lend 10 to 1. So if I go put up my boat and get a $100,000 loan on my boat, they can turn around and do $1 million worth of loans 10 to 1. They go 9 other people for 100K, just for example here. But if we're issuing all of those loans, that money to those loans in stable coins, every one of those loans has to be 1-to-1 backed or
1-to-1
surplus.
backed.
And that ain't the way they currently do
That's
it.
a break in the system.
That's
Definitely.
the break in the system
The
that
matrix
forces
doesn't work
banks
without
to get on ledger
correct.
and to stop margining their business, right?
Yeah.
And therein lies what I believe is the fight that no one's publicly actually having, right? So when you come back to that notion, I think executive directors telling them, listen, you can offer yield just like anybody else. And I think to your point about the banks not wanting to talk or negotiate, this is the old guard digging their heels in, saying, we've been here for so long, we shouldn't have to move. We shouldn't have to change. Well, let me tell you, the music industry thought the same thing with file sharing, and
Yeah.
that industry has been destroyed because of it. And guess what? The taxi industry thought the same thing, and Uber came in and destroyed it. And if the banks don't get their head out of the clouds, they're about to be destroyed. They better embrace what they can and become a node on a network and use your name as trusted branding to
No
keep your
doubt.
client base moving forward for the next 20 to 50 years, or you're out of this game, because that's where this is going. And I also believe, to the senator's points, the banks digging in actually helps the Democrats abandon them. Because if you won't negotiate, then I've taken your money for campaigning and lobbying and the rest of it. But you know what? You're not giving me anything. So now I can't abandon you when I go to the room to vote, because
Exactly.
you're the one not moving here, right?
Well, and I think the point you're getting at is that they're kind of positioning themselves into a corner. Now, granted, don't forget the American Banking Association and the lobby behind the banking industry still $500 billion. That's the largest, number one. So money usually ends up talking in the end. I guess the question now is there enough money there to talk in the end against the US dollar, which is really what it boils down to. You had the digital chamber that pushed back on it. They came back and did this report here on Friday. It was called the Stablecoin Reward Principles. And this is the document. I'll leave a link to this PDF. Let me bring that PDF up right there. Here we go. So this was on the 13th. This was the digital chamber. It was basically the stablecoin reward principles. What they were trying to do, which was retain Section 404 around the material ecosystem disruption, which is what they believe that the banks are going to get basically bank run, is what it boils down to. This was a good document, but at the same time, you had the idea of where this could go. My question to you, and back to your point, I think is very solid, is that we're dealing with really more of an angle on fractional reserve lending versus bank departure. Because I think the trusted way, if they simply offer stable coins, they could probably even offer less of a reward.
Exactly.
Just because they're trusted. I think people would stay with them. What do you
Why
think?
would I open a new account? I've never done this crypto stuff. I think you're spot on, Paul.
Yeah.
Why think about the 50 to 65, 70-year-old person out here is working. This stuff sounds wacky. I don't understand. I just don't understand it. I don't want to understand it. But I'm at Wells Fargo, I'm at PNC, I'm at Bank of America, or wherever. If they offer it and all I got to do is put some of my money right there and never leave the account, that's convenience. And I'm telling you, people will, I believe, keep their business at the bank.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting because you had Ripple, who was somewhat amenable to some of the compromises, but obviously there are other reasons I think that Ripple was kind of going in there, because this exemption around the Section 404 is kind of interesting, because it was mainly putting a ban on yield for just holding stable. I think that's the question, is what does this look like if they were get into, some hybrid model here? Because again, what this does for Ripple and what they want to do here in the United States is absolutely huge, because it immediately turns on the pump for Ripple in the US. So I can see why Brad is like, get it done, get it done. What do you think would be the first thing that Ripple would do if Clarity goes through?
Oh. Oh gosh, I mean, I can only imagine, Paul. I think they just keep doing what they're doing, but then
Yeah,
they start to really lean in and scale the size of what they're doing, right? Because you get beyond this legislation and you're really talking about there's nothing stopping them other than getting awarded the Fed Master Skinny account.
yeah,
And, you know, here's another point too, Paul. You know, well, it's a couple points. One is Ripple's got a national bank charter, buddy.
yeah.
So, however you slice this pie, Ripple's winning. So if crypto gets more of the pie, they win. If the banks get a little bit of an edge, Ripple still wins.
Right.
They've positioned themselves rightfully so, by the way. They have been through more legally than any other project in this space, bar none. And they still, Brad and everybody at Ripple, still today, and shout out to them and all that they've done, still remain embracing of the entire digital asset space and not just themselves. And
Sure.
that's quite a statement in this space. The other thing I would say is like getting this legislation on the other side of this legislation. We got to have that Fed Skinny Master account, man,
Yeah.
because that's really where it opens the door to where this is like full circle moment here.
Well, and you look at also the RLUSD ecosystem, I think immediately turns on, because this would give Ripple the capacity basically for institutional settlement
Absolutely.
overnight. And now you're talking about what could be with RLUSD, basically a permission DEX
Yeah.
on the XRP ledger. So now you're getting into, which would be a regulated foreign exchange. That in itself opens up to Forex. So that, of course, we know what could happen there in terms of volume. So I think that would be one of their big moves in general. Banks also, the partnerships that they've got, I think accelerate here in the US, because they haven't been able to do many bank partnerships here in the US. Most have
Yep.
been global. So kind of interesting here for Ripple. I think they're in the lead for it. There could
I
be other winners. Don't get me
yes.
wrong.
I
You could,
definitely think there'll be multiple winners, just like there's multiple protocols that run the internet we're using right
yeah,
now.
for sure.
I absolutely believe that. I know you do too. And we're just A being these two things, in this conversation, but there's going to be multiple winners, right? And just like, people heard about the Canton network for DTCC,
Right.
right? And they're like, oh my God, it's over for the XRP ledger. It's over for Ripple. It's over for this. It's like, whoa, whoa, slow down. you know, Canton Network is really, this public permissionless ledger that they've created for their clients, like a firewall, right?
Mhm.
And then everything else can plug into it. This is how I see the world developing.
Yeah.
Right. And this is what makes the most sense. Everybody gets their system built in house for their customers. And then you plug into the other protocols, and then you can decide what information should be shared or not shared. And I just feel like that's the best way forward. And that looks like what we're seeing proliferate.
Yeah. Well, you also have to future proof your business and
Amen.
possibly your ecosystem.
Yep.
And if you look at what Garlinghouse is doing right now in terms of his role with the CFT advisory committee,
Yeah.
that to me is a future proofing move,
Yeah.
especially around these market structures that as we do see them go forward. So that in itself, I think, only position. I put out a tweet, even said, watch what the alphas in the room are doing. And there's a handful of alphas in that advisory committee that I think will start to dictate, or at least advise in a way that it dictates where this market could go post clarity going through,
You
for sure.
well, to
Well,
your point also, I mean, there's been a lot of drama over this. And,
yeah,
it was I think it was a treasurer or a senator, but or both. But certainly the treasurer had mentioned that he's like, we had a draft that everybody loved
everybody
already.
loved it. Yeah,
This is not to me, this is more kind of like, smoke screens and mirrors. One company stood up. Brian Armstrong stood up.
Yeah.
Now, there's been people that said that it was a good cop, bad cop situation where they stood up and threw arms about it, and they were basically speaking for a lot of the other part of the industry. That's unknown. It's speculative. I feel because we saw the digital chamber come out at that time, Ripple came out, Fidelity came out, Bitso, I think it was, and Circle,
Yeah.
and endorsed that draft we're talking about. So the banks were into it, right? So whatever it is, there is a draft that is acceptable to 99.9999 of
Bingo.
everyone involved here. If we just go back to that, I think this thing gets done.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and the points that you're making, I think, are very valid in the sense that we've got two pressure points brewing right now. The White House and the administration understand what this means for the global dollar.
Yeah.
I also think that it's a positioning around the innovation side. So even Paul Atkins, even though he's very soft spoken, I've listened to a couple of his interviews now. He's kind of doubled down on the innovation layer for what the SEC is trying to do for no action, which is opening up the gambit for how this is going to play out, because this is going to really flow into a window for American leadership to take the role. And the problem is this window is not going to stay open for much longer, because you've got what happens in Asia, obviously in the UAE with Dubai and everything there. And then, of course, you have Singapore, Hong Kong. I mean, the opportunities here for the United States are unlimited, especially as the EU starts to weaken, which is very key
Well,
going forward. So,
macro, looking at the points that you just made, earlier you had asked, do I think I'd see like a Mag 20, Mag 30?
yeah,
Absolutely, I see that. And there's going to be a handful of protocols that win and really serve a role and really forge a path forward, which really brings me to like the kind of conversation, partial conversation we had about Bitcoin and the strategic reserve.
yeah.
Is it goes to the digital stockpile,
Mhm.
digital asset stockpile reserve. These things I think are an absolute critical must. They are paramount that we acquire these
Gotta
assets.
do it. Yeah.
And you can't do it by taxing the taxpayer, which is why I pound the ground so hard for, I don't know if it's a year and a half, 2 years, whatever it is. I just keep saying it. Now, maybe I'm going back to the home. I don't know. But I just believe that you got to open up because look, what's the backbone of our monetary system? It's the bond
Exactly.
market.
Yeah.
So if you open up a bond market for these digital assets that are becoming the most important commodities, just like oil and gold have been for hundreds of years for us now, then it just makes logical sense that we should start acquiring these through a bond issuance where you could profit share with the citizens of the world
Mhm.
instead of taxing us to acquire it. It just seems like the next logical step. And then the US can gather these assets. And then listen, I do believe ultimately XRP is price controlled the same way that oil is geopolitically.
Interesting. Okay.
You have enough reserves with it that you're going to release them if you want to bring the price down in times of crisis or whatever, like they do with oil, or you buy it up off the market to make sure it has a great floor price for the market.
Bingo. Yeah.
That's
Which is,
where we're at here.
I think we are. Listen, we're going to be sharing these kind of thoughts and many more coming up in May over at, of course, the XRP Vegas, Las Vegas event. You guys can, of course, hit that at the end. Make sure and visit that website right there and get your tickets. Brad Kimes will be there doing the MC of the whole show. So it's going to be fantastic. And we'll be talking about this more as it gets closer with more speakers and stuff like that. So you guys be on the lookout and all that good stuff. Brad, any last words?
I could say that people better get their tickets to xrplasvegas.com. Go get your ticket. The sale ends March 1st. And Paul, you've been there. Like, what we're going to have in the way of people, speakers, former regulators, and top industry leaders on stage, really talking about where they're going, either with the company or the current state of the market and what this all looks like. I can't even begin to tell people how many times I've come home from that conference and throughout the next year, see the conversation start to evolve and mature that we were having on stage a year before. It's so critically
It is
important for
where the
people to come and
early,
get that info.
definitely is where the early thought and innovation.
Yes.
starts to surface, because I would agree with that from just some of the conversations that I had there last year. Last year, I don't know if are you making the room bigger? Because last year it was like there was almost standing room only. So how are you going to deal with the mass here?
We are paying attention to those things, and we are working with the property, and we have a company that we've brought in to help us this year because we scaled
Okay.
so quickly over the last
Yeah.
4 years now. So this has been a huge step for us, and it's the next natural progression here. So we're prepared to handle it. By the way, the stage and the look of this conference will be completely different this year.
Oh,
It's
cool.
going to be incredible. I mean, we're taking this thing to another level of class and delivery for everybody to be at the best level you could be
Love it.
seen at this
I
conference.
love it, man. All right, Brad, it was good having you on today. Thank you so much for stopping in. We appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure, Paul. Thank you, my friend.
You bet. All right, we'll see you. All right, you guys know what to do. Make sure and hit like and subscribe, and we will catch you next time right here on the XRP Pod. Take care.